Hey garden friends, I wanted to talk to you about a subject. I actually wrote a script for last March 2025, and I never did produce a video because I didn't think it suited my audience. But then I had some questions about this. So I decided to address it, and that is how to make your garden look more expensive on a budget and more high-end. So let's get rolling and talk about that. All right. So here's my script that I wrote last March, and I'll tell you why I didn't go ahead and do a video, because I didn't think it really fit my style or what I preach here, and that was to let go of perfection. And many of the notes in here kind of has that going towards perfection, not perfection, you know what I mean? More work. I'm into low maintenance, so some of these are more work. So I'm gonna go through, there's how many in here? 15. And I'll tell you my opinion on them. In the interim, I'm going to go ahead and pot up these. I started these back in October or November. These are white swan echinacea. They've been indoors on the light rack. And that's as far as I got. I need to pot them up. And then I'll put them back in there because it's supposed to get really cold out here. So also I had, my Canterbury bells did terrible. So I'm gonna try to start some seeds, more seeds. But right here, you notice in here, I got 2 feverfews and 1 Canterbury bell. I did not seed the feverfew. So obviously I had some potting soil that was tainted or had other seeds in it. So anyways, let's go back to this on creating a luxury garden or an expensive garden on a budget. So that is the point, budget, but I don't think many of these are necessarily low maintenance, and that's something I try to steer towards because I know a lot of people need easy and low maintenance. So number 1, choose a cohesive color palette. So many high-end gardens often have a well thought out color scheme, such as whites, purples, and greens or blues. Now I do pick themes, like for my artist garden, it's complementary colors like orange with purple. There's some white in there, some beautiful foliage, and that can help to create a more cohesive look that may seem more high-end. But I think of Sissinghurst. There's one border that really inspired me, and she went through the colors. It starts out, I can't remember the exact, sequence of colors, but it did. It started like pink and then went into the purple and then went into the red, and it was all in one border, but it looked magnificent as it graduated. Orange, red to orange to yellow, and then, like that, then just continued on in that vein. And it was mass areas. It really was pretty. And so, but having a cohesive color palette now, so like my rose cottage garden, which I aim to have the pinks and lavenders and white and not have yellow, though some rudbeckias try to sneak in there, that color palette just creates a soothing tone. Whereas if you had an area with reds and yellows and oranges, that's a bright, vibrant, warm area, or what the hot colors. So that is that, and my take on that. So invest in perennials and self-seeding flowers. I do not know how this pertains to looking expensive, but it says rather than buying expensive annuals every year, focus on perennials like peonies, hostas, and hydrangeas that come back season after season. Self-seeding flowers like poppies, larkspur, and alyssum will spread naturally, filling your garden with effortless beauty. Now, I don't know how this creates an expensive-looking garden other than having big areas filled with like one plant, like all daisies, great drifts of color. And I talked about this in my last video, how I came by that naturally with things that just reseeded themselves. I disagree with expensive annuals because I have found petunias in 6-packs for $6, or like the, was it a 16-pack I got last year on the bargain rack of Lowe's? I filled all my window boxes and it was on sale for $7. So I don't agree that annuals are always expensive. And filling in an area, like I did one year, start Tidal Wave Silver Petunias. And that's in the Wave Petunia family. And it just filled in as a ground cover. So gorgeous. And the white with the little hints of lavender in it was beautiful as an understory to other plants. I did have to cut it out of my roses because it wanted to swamp my roses. That's how vigorously it grew. But that was not a big deal. But having it as a ground cover really did elevate the look of my garden. But it wasn't very expensive. I think I just ordered those seeds again. I think it was $5 for 10 seeds. May seem a little high, but I got 100% germination, and they just filled in. They would go 4 feet. So if you put one every 4 feet, it would fill in and just do beautiful. So I guess number 2, invest in perennials and self-seeding flowers, is kind of on the budget end, and having big swaths of color makes it look expensive. So use gravel for pathways and borders. It says gravel is an affordable way to define spaces in your garden while giving it a luxurious feel. A simple pea gravel pathway lined with bricks or stones instantly adds charm and structure. Now I will say I like the look of gravel. I like gravel. I have a gravel garden, and I was very interested in growing that. It's just a small area. But wow, do I have to really pull the weeds out of it, because the weeds love to come up in that gravel. They love whatever's underneath, the paving sand or whatever, to germinate. So that's a lot of work. So if you have a gravel area, and if you have a gravel area, it may be high maintenance, but it may like really look pretty. Now my husband put in gravel here in front of my my greenhouse, and that was more for cleanliness than, because the path is dirt, than it was elevating the look. But it does define the pathway very beautifully. But to keep it free of weeds, I will have to pour boiling water on it when I start to see weeds coming up. And that's a safe way to get rid of them quickly, and not have to sit there and pull every one and not use like a herbicide. I got a bee coming in. So yeah, I would say that is not budget friendly. Gravel has gotten very expensive. So to me, that's not elevating it on a budget. My husband had bought a big truckload to put a foundation in for something, and we had left over, and that's why it didn't cost me anything. But that truckload for the foundation did. All right, add height with trellises and arches. So vertical elements like trellises, arbors, and even DIY obelisks create an upscale look by drawing the eye upward. Grow climbing roses, clematis, or ivy for an elegant cascading effect. I would say grow ivy if you keep it in a container. I've shared with you trees around here that are being choked, tall pines and cedars that are being choked to death by ivy that has gotten away from people in their gardens. And when it finds a place to thrive, it will take over. So no, skip the ivy. I say adding height with trellises and arches can be expensive if you have to pay for them. I do DIY trellises. I also have a couple of videos on an obelisk arbor. And anytime you add vertical interest in a garden, it just gives it another level of beauty. Whether or not it makes it look expensive, I guess, depends on how you use it. You could have areas. I think vertical interest is wonderful, and it can create privacy, or you can create garden rooms by separating them by the trellises. But really, does it make it look expensive? I don't know. You tell me. Okay, 5. Incorporate statement planters. Large decorative planters make a garden look grand, but you don't have to spend a lot. Spray paint inexpensive plastic pots to mimic stone or metal, or repurpose thrift store finds like old buckets or barrels. Number 1, I rarely find large pots at thrift stores. I think everybody else has the idea. Number 2, painting them is good for the first year. And then after that, they start to chip and peel. I will show you some of mine that I have done. And then they look shabby, and then you have to keep doing it. So it may elevate the look of the garden, but it is high maintenance in the long run. And then when it talks about large containers, if you go buy large containers, unless you find them like I did at Costco for $15, then that's not budget friendly. So I know large containers can do very well as far as elevating the garden look, rather as opposed to a bunch of little garden containers. But as far as being budget friendly, I guess it depends on how well you like the treasure hunt, because you'd have to look far and wide to find inexpensive large containers. And then filling them is a whole nother matter. So yeah, yep, it can make it look more expensive. Nope, I don't think it's necessarily budget friendly unless you really are able to get around and find thrift store hunt and you want to take your time with it so that you can find those larger containers. Some of those stoneware containers that are larger, they're like $200 and $300. I really find it hard to spend that on a container. I don't know why. Maybe I'm just a cheapo. All right. Create a focal point. This one I can agree on. So expensive gardens often have a key feature, such as a fountain, statue, or oversized urn. You can DIY a water feature using a simple pump and a large ceramic pot. Even a well-placed bench surrounded by flowers can act as a stunning focal point. Now this one I can agree on. You can create a focal point without expending a lot of money. If you don't have availability of a garden bench or whatever, now you can find these on Facebook Marketplace if you're a garage sailor, things like that. But again, take your time, really look. I found a couple of wooden benches at Home Depot. They were relatively inexpensive compared to others, and I love them. They're not comfortable, but they do look nice, and they make a good focal point. Now you can also find inexpensive bird baths that are not necessarily concrete, and they are solar, and you can have them, flow. So that is also pretty. You could also DIY them. I have a DIY bird bath I made from a galvanized tub and a solar fountain, and it draws in the hummingbirds. Really gorgeous. But you know what? With the galvanized tub, I don't necessarily think that is an expensive look. To me, it's a rustic look that just is charming, but expensive looking, no. Okay, yeah, and I have a DIY obelisk pattern or design on my blog, and also one for the arbor that I mentioned prior. So, yeah, those. Okay, layer plants for depth and luxury. Professional gardens are designed with layers. Tall trees or shrubs in the back, medium-sized plants in the middle, and low-growing ground covers in the front. This layering effects make a garden look lush, full, without requiring a massive plant investment. That's just general good garden design for most people. Now, I mentioned in my last video that when I let things reseed and just run amok and fill in thickly, that is budget gardening. But as far as a luxurious look, it's a little bit wild looking. This design is pleasing to the eye, but whether it's expensive or not, I guess it goes back to whether or not you make it cohesive. Yeah, it's just basically good, logical garden design. So I guess it could elevate a garden. All right, use mulch for a polished finish. A fresh layer of mulch not only keeps weeds at bay and retains moisture, but it also gives flower beds a well-maintained and cohesive look. Choose natural bark mulch for an elegant, rich garden aesthetic. Yeah, it does pull it together, but my plants are so closely planted together, when you have these huge drifts, you don't even see the mulch. So I guess this is for gardens that have a lot of space between their plants. It's good for the soil as long as you don't get it too thick. I often use ground covers as mulch, and they can do the same. If it's a beautiful ground cover that offsets the flowers above it, I'm talking very low growing, and I'm talking the ones that are called steppables, and I have a video on the ones that I have grown and love. I'm trying a few new ones to me. One's called Australian turf or something. It reminds me of Scotch moss, but it's not. I'm trying it out. We'll see how well it does this next summer. But that is much more budget friendly than having to buy bark mulch. And many of the bark mulches you find in bags, they've been treated with dyes. The dye is toxic and leaches into your soil. So like you find the black mulch, I love the color of the black mulch, but it is dyed and that leaches down into your soil, and it's not something I want. I don't want to put chemicals in my soil, and who knows when we get heavy rains where that washes off to, you know. So I don't want it to pollute local streams. We live by a lake, and a lot of the drainage around here, we have seasonal streams, and our gardens drain into that, and then it goes to the lake, and I don't want to add any chemicals to that if I can. So use mulch for a polished finish. Yes and no. Use low-growing ground covers if you can. Okay, edge your beds for a crisp look. Now this may be elevated, and it does give it a crisp edge and make it look tidier, but it is not low maintenance. So a clean edge between garden beds and pathways instantly elevates a space. Use bricks, stones, or even a simple trench edging technique to create defined lines that make your garden look professionally landscaped. Now, usually you have to keep doing this, and I do it in certain areas with my string trimmer. I'll turn it on its side instead of going flat across the ground, turn it on its side, and I'll just go along the edge, especially certain pathways that have like the clover, mini clover in it, because I don't want the clover to go into the flower bed. I want it to be like a green pathway. So that's how I keep it from merging. It'll keep crawling into the garden beds. But yeah, I would say that edging does create a little bit more of a refined look. It's just going to take more work. Okay, repurpose and upcycle. So turn old furniture into garden decor, use pallets to create raised beds. I'll get back to that in a minute. Or transform vintage windows into a greenhouse. Repurposing materials adds character to your garden while saving money. Pallets. I absolutely will not use pallets in my garden. We owned 10, 15 years ago, a manufacturing company, and we had pallets throughout our warehouse that had barrels of chemicals sitting on them. These were heat-treated pallets, so if you read the stamp on the pallet, it just said it was heat-treated, and the chemicals did not leave evidence that they've been on there. They just, the wood looked fine, but they were in that wood. And if you were to use them and they started to decompose from being against moist soil, like if you used it for a raised bed, then that would leach into the soil. That is not something you want in your soil at all. When we would put them out to be collected by a hazmat or hazardous waste company, they would get taken by people who, the pallet craze, building things out of pallets, went crazy for a while. And I would put signs out there, these have toxic chemicals on them, and people would still take them. I've seen cradles built out of them. People put it on their walls as a rustic decor. And yes, those chemicals off gas. So yeah, don't use pallets, because you really, no matter what it says, unless they are brand new from the factory, do not use pallets, because you don't know what is on them whatsoever. So that's my spiel on that. Now, as far as upcycling different things, if you have an eye for it. A lot of people who do, I shouldn't say a lot of people, a lot I've seen that do this or have done this, it can look cluttered, can look messy, and it could look junky rather than elegant and or expensive. So just be judicious. And if you've got, I have a friend who can turn the worst crap into the most elegant whatever. I can't do that. I have to ask her to help me. So yeah, just you've got to have the eye. Alrighty, incorporate outdoor lighting. Soft lighting makes any garden feel magical in the evening. Use solar-powered lights along pathways, hang string lights in trees, or place lanterns around seating areas for an upscale ambiance. I don't know if that really creates upscale. It does provide an element of romance Now, this needs to be done judiciously. You get too much going on and it doesn't look nice, it just looks busy. But I have a few of the solar lights that you poke into the ground to go along my sidewalk in the front because we don't have a light out by the driveway, and it does help illuminate that. At one time I had fairy lights going up over the arch in the front. They were solar powered, so they were very, I don't know, subdued. It wasn't very bright, but it did help to light up that area a little bit, and it did look pretty. They lasted 1 year. They only costed me 20 bucks off Amazon or something, and then I threw them away. I don't like throwaway stuff, so I haven't replaced them. But yeah, you need to be minimal with it to be elegant. If you have too much going on, it can look too trashy. I don't know, just not elegant. So, number 12, add water for an elegant touch. A water feature, I love a water feature. It's great for critters, but it depends on the water feature whether or not it makes your garden look more elegant or just more rustic. I had a fountain made from an old wheelbarrow and watering cans. Now, I wouldn't say that looked elegant. It looked rustic, it looked interesting, and it was fun. But elevating my garden, other than creating interest and the sound, I loved the sound that it created. It just made it a more relaxing space, but I wouldn't say it made it more elegant. So I guess it depends on the water feature you add. And if a water feature that would really elevate your garden into elegance, I think would be a little bit more expensive. I could be totally wrong with all of these. You tell me what you think. So prune and maintain your plants. No matter how many plants you have, an untidy garden won't look expensive. Keep shrubs neatly trimmed, deadhead flowers regularly, and remove weeds to maintain a clean, curated look. Yeah, that's true. If you want that type of look. But that takes a lot of work. So having a high maintenance garden may look more expensive, but really, are you going to enjoy it that much more? For me, a low maintenance garden is much more enjoyable. I think I have a video coming up. I'm sure we'll see when I get it. It's called something about the boring garden being the best garden. I think you'll enjoy that. It really resonates with me, and I think you're going to love it. So let's see. Yes, pruning and maintaining a lot, that does elevate your garden. I agree with that. But I don't agree that you have to go to all that work to enjoy your garden. Okay, decorate with garden art. Elegant gardens often include tasteful sculptures, wind chimes, or decorative ironwork. Look for budget-friendly pieces at thrift stores, estate sales, or even DIY your own art with concrete molds. That depends on what you can make the concrete molds out of. I've done some hypertufa, but by the time you buy everything you need and the time you put into it and the learning curve, I wouldn't say it was on budget. So again, with the garden art, you can find neat things in thrift stores like certain mirrors, and I've seen some DIY thrifted garden decor that did look beautiful. But again, you've got to have the ability to go to the thrift stores or go to the yard sales or find them on, and a lot of time I don't have time for that. I love thrift stores. I love yard sales, but I don't have time. I am super busy. So that doesn't always work for me. Now, I will say, I did one time, we had a thrift store up here, and they had a white wrought iron garden table and chair set. It was beautiful, and it was only $50. And at the time I thought, I don't need it. I'm kicking myself now. That was very elegant looking, and it would have elevated my garden tremendously. And I passed it up thinking, because if I don't need it, I'm like, oh no, I shouldn't buy it. But for $50, I am now kicking myself. So if you find a bargain and it looks elegant, don't second guess yourself. Nab it up. Okay. Now with decorating with garden art, you can find bargains, but it's going to take time if you have the ability to go and do that stuff. So grow fragrant and luxurious looking plants. lavender, jasmine, and David Austin roses. Not just David Austin roses. There's a lot of roses that look very elegant and full and lush. There's the romanticas. There's all kinds. So I'm just going by what I wrote here. Add a sensory element to your garden. A sensory garden is wonderful. I love scent in the garden. It makes it feel like an expensive retreat. Even inexpensive herbs like rosemary and thyme contribute beauty and fragrance. So yeah, they're easy to grow from seed. And they do have, I love walking by the rosemary and the lavender and feeling it. And there's so many things that you could grow. And this luxurious looking plants, these plants don't necessarily look luxurious to me. Now the David Austin roses, they can when they're in full bloom. Mine don't bloom as prolifically as other roses in my garden. So that's where I would go with the roses that provide continuous blooms, not just sporadic blooms. Yes, I would say that as long as you grow things that aren't overpowering, like make sure if you have lilies, you plant them towards the back of the border, because if you have them up close, it's overwhelming rather than lovely as far as scent. And also you don't want your cats to get near it, because the pollen and other parts of the plant are very poisonous. Now my cats have never eaten leaves and stuff in my garden, but the pollen, if it should get on their fur and they lick their fur, yes, it will kill them very quickly. I'm going to close my door. Retain the heat. It was very hot in here earlier. Now the sun's gone behind trees. So yeah, these points make for a beautiful garden no matter what. Even if you don't necessarily want an elegant garden. And many of these features are not necessarily low maintenance. Now it could be budget. If you have the eye to buy junk and make it look gorgeous in your garden, great. I wouldn't go with painting the pots, because I've experienced that. It is a lot more work. And after the first season, going through the winter, they look like junk. And then you have to retreat them if you already have a big full pot, then it's kind of hard to elevate them again. And if you have other pots that do look elegant, or you want them and they're big pots, that can be very, very expensive. So that wouldn't fit with the budget of this take. So now, do you feel like you need your garden to look expensive, or do you want your garden to be enjoyable? Now, it doesn't have to be expensive to be lovely, or even expensive looking to be lovely. So if your garden is a little on the wild side like mine, if you just love each and every plant because of its own beauty, whether or not you have a huge swath of them. I know there's a lot of people who really get caught up in garden design, and that's great if that's what they want. And there are a lot of people who just want someone to come in, design their garden, and they just want to go out and sit and enjoy it. Whereas I'm speaking to fellow gardeners who just love plants. And sometimes if you just love plants and you just buy plants, you're not going to necessarily have an elegant looking garden, but you are going to have an enjoyable one. I didn't pot up anything, so I'm going to go ahead and pot these up right now. It's not hard. I just put them in these containers, and I'll take them back in the house to grow on. And that's that. So I will see you in my next video. And happy gardening, even if it's not expensive looking.